A good conversation can shift the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance? Join the authors of Design to Change and explore this series of conversations with designers and event owners. Driven by the need and conversations with event owners and event designers who use the event canvas around the world, this series explores the depths of conversations to elevate your abilities to look and act beyond the now. Episodes are hosted by Ruud, Janssen, Rolf Friesen, Dennis Lehrer, and Paul Rukens, with illustrious changemakers, designers, and pioneers in the field of design and beyond. To explore these conversations and additional content, visit designtochange.online. For now, let's start the conversation.
Conversations.
All right, here we are, back. Year plus two, Monique. Welcome back to the Design to Change podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me again. We're back, always having great conversations. So I look forward to this one as well.
Absolutely. So the last time we spoke on this podcast, well, on the 8th of May, 2025, today is the 13th of May, 2026. And like clockwork, we set the horizon of change, and, you know, all of these things have happened over the last year. And I wanted to bottle up that excitement that we got from this gap of looking back 365 plus days and seeing what's on the horizon of change. Before we ask that, there's always one question I wanted to ask from the Design to Change book. And for those of you who might not have met Monique Ruff-Bell yet, which is hard to imagine after having had two of these episodes already for our listeners, Monique Ruff-Bell is the Chief Program and Strategy Officer at TED. Many of you have run across all sorts of expressions of TED, whether it's videos or TED Ed or TED AI or TED Sports or TED Food or TED Health or TED, you know, the big TED, as you like to call it, I think, Monique, right? And also the TEDx events, the 3,000 events across the planet. But let's go back for a second to, you know, a good conversation can determine the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance?
Is that the question? Would I leave it to chance to have a good conversation?
Yeah.
So I would say sometimes. And sometimes not, because if I'm really excited about talking to someone like yourself, there are definitely seeds that I would want to plant to help pivot us into a really robust conversation, so that we walk away feeling like, I'm really glad we did this. Like that, and that's the thing, like when you're kind of creating even experiential environments or whatever, you want your attendees to walk away and say, I'm really glad I invested my time in this. And so you always have to think backwards of what smoke signals, what seeds you need to plant to make sure that happens. So serendipity can be planned, is what I like to say.
Yeah, not leaving it to chance, but the serendipity can be orchestrated more or less.
Yes,
Now,
yes, exactly.
I remember the last time we spoke, you know, we dug deep into the strategy and some of the things that you guys are experiencing as change, right? After 40 years of TED and creating the next 40 years of TED, and having seen the stewardship for the last 25 years by Chris Anderson, and your role over the last now 5 years. Am I saying that? 4 or 5 years?
It'll be 5 years in January, so 4.5 years.
Yeah, 4.5 years. A lot of shifts and changes happening left and right. New events have been born in the meantime. The TED Next event. Last time I remember we spoke about in the first episode, it was about to happen in year plus one. It had just happened, right? And now, you know, the best performing first time event in the TED series. I'm keen to catch up on all of that stuff, but especially what I'm keen to catch up on is, you know, some of the big shifts that are happening that you guys are working on. I know you've just had your big TED in Vancouver, the last one in Vancouver last month.
That's right. Yep.
Tell us, how did that go?
It was phenomenal. And a TED experience, you know, we're actually working through what is the right language to explain what a TED experience is, because conference is just not the right word. It just really isn't. And and no matter how much you try to explain the wrapper behind what our experience feels like, when they hear the word conference, their brain just cannot process that this is a mix of wonder, um, learning, um, being inspired, but also a place of hope, a place of optimism, a place of fun, and activities and unique things you would probably never get to experience in life just by chance. You think the people on the stage are the brightest and the most interesting, and it's not. It's the people who are standing on the coffee line with you. It's everybody. It's everybody, because a certain type of person is attracted to that type of space. A certain type of person is a curious person, and they want to have these conversations that have nothing to do with their title or being a representative of a company or anything like that. It's just that I just heard the most interesting thing that came off of this stage about how animals and oceans interact with each other. And I want to have more conversation about that because I've never heard that before. And where can we talk about it? We have a lot of brain dates that happen at TED,
Mm.
and one of them is fathers of TED, in our challenges of that, and so just to put humanity and humanness at the center of content, at the center of experience, I think it's so special and unique, and not a lot of people get that from a conference.
And I think it reflects not just in the words you use, where you shifted from ideas for sharing to ideas, change everything, but also
Right.
this year you talk about all of us, right? That was the theme for the TED 2026 edition.
Yes, we're all
Last
in it together, my friends.
the year before you reimagined humanity, which was also no small task, right?
Right.
In 2025. Last year you couldn't even share with us where TED is going next, the big TED, but I think
I know.
now the big splash and reveal has been
Drum
done.
roll.
Drum roll, drum
Yes.
roll. Tell us, Monique, if people don't know yet, where
So
should they head next year?
after 12 years and then 11 conferences, because of course we had COVID and we didn't have conference one of those years,
Yeah.
we are moving our conference from Vancouver to San Diego.
Wow.
And, this wasn't about uh, researching just to find a venue. It wasn't just about logistics. It really was about us finding a place where the leadership of the community, the businesses of the community, the innovators, and those doing such interesting work within the community want to help shape a TED experience in that community.
Yeah.
And to bring, just a different way, a different energy, and want to support us beyond anything than just have your event in this venue, whether it is with the activities and experiences, whether it's with the people who are doing, behind the scenes changes that are going to really affect society. Like, a lot of innovation sits under the surface of San Diego. It being a military town, it being a town with, huge biotech, it being a border, they consider them a borderless town, even though they're on the border with Mexico and Tijuana. And there's just a lot of things percolating I don't think people realize.
Yeah.
And so when I first, went there, and we're looking at the different venues, and I was like, something is going on here. Like, this something is in the air, and I can feel it. And when I asked Chris and Jay, who was the CEO at the time, and Chris Anderson to come, I was like, I think this is the place. And they came, and they first started talking about logistics, and I was like, no, 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 please, we can make anything happen anywhere.
Yeah.
Don't think about logistics here. I want you to feel what I felt. Just talk and ask these type of questions. I'm telling you, you're going to feel like this is a TED-like place. And this is just going to make everything so much easier for us. And they did, and they leaned into that. And the way that city has come out for us, I met with the mayor multiple times about how we're going to make sure this is, they're going to be able to help integrate certain things into our programs. It's just, I'm so excited about what we're going to create in San Diego. TED brings their magic no matter where. And, we've moved our conferences before
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
It literally is about making sure the energy of a destination really matches who we are, and that we can help bring that out more through our conference experience.
Yeah. And some say that the vessel where the conference is being held, like you said, you feel something in the air in San Diego. Funnily enough, we felt that also when we did our inaugural event design certificate program in San Diego, and every January we go back with our program there, because it's addictive. Designing under a palm tree in January. You guys are in April, I suppose, in the similar kind of time frame in Q2 for your event, but there's something magical about hanging out at that place. We tend to go to university campuses, so we're at SDSU, but there is something magical about San Diego, and I feel what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
For those people, because culture can be felt, right? In some way. How and you've just described it to us using a lot of different adjectives, and I want you to come over and feel what it's like. Don't focus on the logistics, right? For somebody that, they're big TED, as you called it last time,
mm-hmm.
That's a big thing when you change the destination, or when and you've done it before, obviously, and you're hosting all these other events in different destinations. But I think that it does sound like a big strategic decision, though.
And it's interesting because, we have leadership change that happened at TED. But this strategic decision was made years before this.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, contracts end with a venue, and you either have the choice to re-up it if you want to, or to go to a new destination. And, we were in that destination for a really long time.
Yeah.
And you can get really comfortable in how everything works, and it's rinse and repeat. And it's also, it's a little bit of a trek as well to get to Vancouver, even though from the West Coast it might be an easier flight. It's a little bit of a trek.
Yeah.
And so you're thinking about kind of, a good chunk of our audience comes from the West Coast of the US. And so it was a strategic move to say, like, let's make this a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And think about kind of going back to the West Coast, but also it's time for a refresh. Sometimes you have to shake things up in order to create and evolve something for the better, to try different things, and to get the audience to be open, because there's such a sense of ownership with the community. Like, they know where they're going to go for this, they know what they're going to do for this or whatever. And anytime you try to change something, sometimes they get a little bit in their feelings about some of the changes because they're just used to operating in a particular way.
Yeah.
And so when you move a destination, people are open to change because they know it's going to change. It's new. It's a new destination. It's a new venue. I can't operate and think about that. I always go to this particular coffee shop. I do these things. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to lean into that energy of everyone knows there's change. Everyone's going to expect that there's going to be change. Let's make it worth their while, and really think about kind of how we can make sure we have and keep the heart of TED and the core of TED, and always be thoughtful, always be human-centered. But now we can redesign certain things, and people will absolutely be more open to seeing that.
Yeah. And for you, leading, having been the head of events, but now leading the strategy and, the programming,
Yeah.
what kind of challenges does that pose to you and your team to keep all of that undercover for such a long time? I can imagine, like, you're like, everybody's asking, and I was asking last year, and, you were elegantly saying, oh, it's going to be announced with a big splash. And then when it did splash, everybody notices, but you have to keep that under the lid for quite some time. How did you manage to do that?
It was a 2-year process for us. It was me on the plane for 2 years before we decided on a destination of what felt right. And if you're on the road that much, we went to a lot of places. And so that's why it was never about logistics for me. It was never about that, because these places could have held us. We could have done our event in some of these. It really was just this gut reaction and being a good listener to what people were saying around me in certain destinations and making sure it kind of felt right. And I always say, like, TED leans into emotive experiences. This was the same type of thing with making this decision. And so you also, you want to make sure you got things set up right before you make an announcement. All the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, contracts are signed, people are in, partners are in, and you just want to feel like everyone is like, they got it. It's good. Like, it's not anything shaky or anything like that. And so because you want to put your best foot forward when you're making such a big change, you're going to be protective of it. You want to make sure that things are aligned in the right way. So that wasn't hard for me because I wanted to make sure that everything that needed to be in place before we say we're coming to San Diego was in place. And once it was, happy to make the announcement.
And so when you decided to make that splash, what did that look like? How did you make this splash matter?
Because the community kind of amplified it. And so it was, we, made the announcement from our stage. Then that was picked up by press. And then people in San Diego, like even on the LinkedIn, I think it's one of my most highest rated shared posts, sharing it left and right. So excited about knowing and understanding that it's a big deal to kind of bring a brand, a conference like TED, where the top of the top, participates, speaks in. The people who are there, they just knew how valuable it was, and the amplification just went crazy about that. And so, we took our attendees on a journey as well. Like we had made a prior announcement the year before that we were starting a process, and then we made the announcement that we're going to San Diego, and so keeping them in the loop about this. And it was really interesting because I thought at this conference I was going to feel a lot of people having a lot of nostalgia, like, oh, I don't want to leave Vancouver. We've been here so long and blah blah. And it didn't happen that way. It was more of like, yeah, we really enjoyed what you did here. I can't wait to see what you do in San Diego. So we set it up in the perfect way that people are now like, okay, I can't wait to see what it is what's up your sleeves. And if you could do this here, we can imagine what you're thinking about doing in San Diego.
Yeah. Super interesting. If you look at because this is something that many, event owners, event designers in associations, federations, corporations, whatever they, NGOs, wherever they might be, they're always faced with that moment, right, of selecting a destination, moving a conference, or, starting a new one somewhere. Did you find there were a lot of differences in the approaches of the destinations and how they, wooed you into making the choice for them? Or did it tell you a lot about the culture of the destination, or were you like surprised with some of it? Or what are some of the things that people might not easily talk about, or without naming names, but more a question of like, because it is a big responsibility to suggest and then finally make it happen for that new destination. Without burning bridges behind you from the past destination. Like you said, very elegantly, people were able to, to acknowledge that, oh, this was a really good stretch, and now it's time for that new thing. The change also happens to the vessel. How did different destinations approach that, and were there any things there that surprised you?
I don't know if I'm very unique or if so I was like, is it me? I don't know if we just think about events in just a very different way. And for me, it was very different for the destinations to work with us. And the requests that we had about understanding not just your four walls. Like it was, who, even in San Diego, we work very closely with the leads of the Economic Development Corp that's there. I go to San Diego almost every other month for community events. And when I say community events, meaning we host some type of reception, some type of dinner. We'll go to someone's home who has a huge network of things and just talk about TED and kind of what we're looking to do and how they can kind of integrate their company. I've gone to board meetings in San Diego and had that. This is not just logistics. And I think when destinations are dealing with conference organizers, they're dealing with conference organizers who care mostly about just the logistics. And so when we were coming and we were asking, well, who handles this in in this destination? Who should we be talking to this? I've been invited to a board meeting where 60 of the top corporation CEOs were at that board meeting, and I was invited to give a talk about TED. And I talked about kind of how you can integrate your board meetings at a TED conference, integrate some and how you can integrate some other business leanings and get inspired about the innovation that's coming down the pike that would affect your business at TED. This is more than logistics. And so they've never really had someone who was coming and thinking about that, because who are going to be your best word of mouth advertisers when you go into a new destination? The people that are there. Yeah. You have these top businesses and these organizations and these foundations, the foundations alone, who are excited about how can we do collaborations? How can we create fellowships? How can we do different things? Like the ideas that are coming to us about how this can be an expansive thing outside of just hosting a 4 or 5 day conference. And so that was very different for a destination, but that is serving us really, really well in us getting easier access to partners who are going to be sponsors, who want to be underwriters of certain experiences, who want to send groups of people to a TED conference. And we're not cheap. We're a premium conference. We're a $10,000 ticket conference or whatever. And them just thinking of ways how they can integrate just from the local perspective and the regional perspective. We do things in LA. We do such an easy shoot to kind of come down to San Diego. All of that is bigger than logistics. And I think that's what an organizer has to understand. Like, how can you make things easier for you when you're moving to a new destination? It's building a network and a community.
Yeah. Especially when the conference has such a history as well, right? So there is that pedigree, there is that anchoredness in the academic society, in all of these different fields that TED is active in. But also making sure, I think, with what you were saying, you have such a diversified network of events that you're hosting in different places, right? The TED AI in Vienna and in San Francisco, you were mentioning, the TED Sports in Indianapolis, TED Food, TED Health. You've got all these like specialty conferences that are in different places. Does the fact that your amount of specialty conferences has increased over time, does that change the Big TED?
No, we're a generalist conference. And so it's very hard to do deep dives. And when you have something that is changing society like AI, you cannot capture as much as you would love to capture in your conference when you talk about several other different things. And so we knew we needed dedicated spaces for some key niches, things that are happening within sports and technology and college and NIL and all of these other stuff. Like, there's so many things that are changing in certain niche communities that it's important to have space and time to do deep dives in that. And that's what we've kind of learned, is that we can do more with a 2-day deep dive that complements a Big TED. So you might start off with a Big TED. I have plenty of people who go to Big TED and go to these different insight, we call them insight events, where they hear these, these deep dive experiences or content. And then vice versa. A lot of people may find Big TED because they went to an insight event. It was like, well, I want more. what else do you have? And then they want to go to a TED Next or a Big TED.
So the rhythm and cadence of the attendance of people that have gotten the TED ache, right? We talked about that last time, right?
Yes.
Like, I need to go to a TED, or, it's like there's something in them, in which the cadence in which they want to be part of this, connected to the bigger changes that you're designing for. create a certain loyalty, right? You mentioned
Yes.
55 to 60% of the people that go to the big TED tend to return year on year on year.
Right.
Um, do you think that is there gonna be a change, do you think, in that because of a change in destination, or is that gonna, what are you predicting there from a strategic perspective? Like, is the loyalty going to increase? Is it going to change? Is there a shift? What do you see happening?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, we moved our conference before. We weren't always in Vancouver. We were in Long Beach, Monterey, different places in California before we've done this long stint. And
Yeah.
they've come with us on that journey. People come to TED because of TED. It's not because of where the location is of TED. So we don't think that will cause anything. We do see that kind of what's going on with the world and kind of going on with, certain policies from an immigration standpoint and visitors from other countries. Like, maybe I'm going to skip this one this year because of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
We do see that. And it's something that we know we have to plan for because we are now coming back to the US. And I like to tell people that this decision was made before and contracts were signed before
Yeah, you always have a long
the
arc of change in order to
yes.
plan for the future, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so people might think that we made this decision based off of what's going on in the world, and that's not true. It was, you have to plan a move years in advance.
Mm,
And so now we're dealing with some of our international attendees just feeling uncomfortable about being in the US. And
mm,
so we're thinking about the dip that might come from that with us going into San Diego. But we also know there's a lot of excitement, like I said, from the not just local, from the region. And so we'll see probably a little bit more of an influx of new business, new people trying out TED because we're closer. It's easier to get to. People are very excited about us being in that town that hopefully will replace that
mm,
dip. But,
mm,
we are on a roller coaster like everyone else, and we are going to see how things that are happening in our country with our government, how that affects everything. Like even like some of the stuff is affecting the World Cup being based here and seeing how their numbers are much lower than what they thought it was going to be from
mm,
international travelers because of the
mm,
apprehension. So I think
mm.
anyone who deals with international attendees are on a little bit of a roller coaster right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is part of the fact that, ideas have a perspective and they change things from a certain perspective. So I think the necessity to create conversation of friction, we talked about that last time a little bit in um, you know, in the programming, becoming more bold in terms of um, some of those conversations I think we spoke about last time, where
Mhm.
two people facing each other with completely different perspectives on the same topic in a conversation highlight the differences, but also, have a very civilized, conversation in a much bigger arena of people listening in, and you could hear a pin drop, so to say. Um, how how does that change? Are you gonna, is that something you're sustaining and amplifying? Are you gonna keep it the same, like the structure of the TEDx? We spoke about that last time as well, where you said, managing 3,000 TEDx event licensees a year,
And
for a
now it's
small team. That's
4,500.
4,000. You
But
said last time we're gonna
4,500.
try and keep it at 3,000. Okay, now it's 4,000. There goes your horizon of change, right? So you can't stop a good thing. People are just going to pick it up and do it, even as
Right.
volunteer, organizers. So
Right.
that's like from 3,000 to 4,000.
4,500. Yes, we had
Whoa,
4,500 last year. And it was amazing. And a lot of it was coming from the licensees were coming from younger people,
nice.
like wanting to build more community around their colleges and all of this other kind of stuff. But yeah, it was wonderful to see that jump and surprising to see that jump. But it's great. This is a great story of bouncing back from COVID because we were as low as about 2,500 post COVID.
Yeah,
And to get over where we were even pre-COVID, it's
yeah,
really amazing how much the love for TED still exists.
exactly. Yeah. Because the scaffolding of those of those events scattered across the planet geographically, I suppose, is also, and in different communities.
Yep.
Last time you spoke a little bit about also, TED Ed and how that's, influenced into educational spaces. You mentioned your son being in college as well, where,
Mhm.
you know, the generation of my kids and like your kids, they only know the world with a TED in it, right? Where
Yes.
we might have known a world without TED, or
Yes.
it was there, but it wasn't accessible to us, right?
That's right. But
Um,
can I go back to your friction conversation because
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's really interesting.
yeah.
So, we started that trying to create those spaces maybe 2 years ago, and last year. Every year we've gotten better and better. It is not easy. And one of the things that we noticed this year was with our attendees, because they'll give us their feedback. We will hear if something doesn't land or they are unhappy about some of our
Yeah,
content, which is expected. Not everybody's going to love everything, and everybody shouldn't love everything.
yeah.
And we heard less feedback this year about that. And it's because I feel like we're getting better and better at structuring our content, those friction points of content, in a way where people feel like this is now a part of TED. We understand that that's a part of TED now, and I'm glad I got to hear it. I still don't agree with it, but I'm getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's so easy in our day-to-day life to only create an algorithm of media, what we read, who we connect with, that only agrees with us. And I think it was a little bit of a shell shock for a TED attendees to be in spaces, because a lot of them are progressive, to be in spaces where that you're going to have to sit here and listen to someone that you disagree with. But we are going to take care, and we are going to be very thoughtful, and we are really going to coach to make sure the idea, not all the hyperbole that comes out of people, or they're adding little razzle dazzle to anything. No,
Yeah.
just clear the idea of something and where they're understanding and why they feel the way that they do, and kind of what it serves, so that you can really hear the core message of something instead of all the extraness that people can bring when it comes to certain friction content. And I think now the attendees got very comfortable and feel a little bit grateful that they get to hear that, and because they're going to take that back into their regular world, and instead of them just flipping off a message or a person or something like that, they're going to listen to
Mm,
understand, regardless if in the end they still don't agree. And I think that
mm.
is, in this world, we have to get that skill, because there's just a lot of, like, we all need each other. And if we care about creating an environment for our children that is hopeful and that is optimistic and that we feel good about it, we have to learn how to deal with the friction, not go into our separate corners. And I feel like we've been getting really, really good at creating a safe space for that at TED.
No, I think that's really brave, and also admitting the fact that you have to get better at it, because
Yeah.
it's like I can only imagine, like, how do you curate a conversation like that, or how do you practice it, or how do you keep it original? Like, one of the things in these podcasts, for instance, I really think it's important to capture all of the essence of what we discuss from beginning to end, because there's a construct and a flow to how a conversation goes, and you can't just like cut a snippet out of it, which is often what causes dissonance, or
Yes.
missing the context of the full conversation. Which, to be honest, when the people at a conference are together, hopefully having conversations, or listening to conversations, it's linear, and they have to be in that space all the time. You can't cut out pieces and just make it a highlight reel, or make it sound bites for headlines. um, and I think I commend you and the team for for doing it, for rehearsing it, for saying, oh, we're getting better at this. um, your algorithm skills as a team of curation also involve that, right? Like, what do you put in the program? What do you not put in the program? Who do you put on
Hmm.
stage? And then if it's a dual conversation, who faces each other, and why do you select those people to spend that amount of time?
But
have that conversation.
it's not even just an external thing for us. It was an internal thing for us. Like there was a lot of people even internally that really struggled with the fact that we were doing this.
Okay.
And like having so we had to like when we said we were getting better at it, we were getting better at our sensitivities to
Oh,
it
yeah.
and bringing our friction points about certain people being on our stages and stuff like that. Our sensitivities about there's going to be someone who's going to be unhappy, and we always like we bring a lot of mother energy to our conference. We want to take care of you. We want you to feel good about your experience and stuff like that. We don't want you to be unhappy. We don't
Yeah.
want you to feel like you're being challenged in a certain way. And so when you come with that and knowing that you're creating a space now where you're going to hear it, like someone, if they're unhappy and they want to share, they need to express themselves, and they're going to come to you, organizer, to express themselves and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And you can't be as sensitive to the fact that you couldn't just help them through that to make it, no, 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 we're trying to do this and over explain anything. Sometimes you just have to, there's a greater good for what we're trying to do. And there is
Mm,
going to be some challenging emotions that come with that. And we just have to be stoic in sitting in that because it's
mm,
temporary. It's like if they're not sitting at screaming at you, they're not sitting there chasing you down about the choices you made from a curation standpoint. They felt uncomfortable. They want to share they felt uncomfortable. And then they moved through it. And we just had to get used to it internally that we were trying to create this space and how it was going to make us feel that our attendees were going to have these emotional reactions to some people that were presented on our stage that they might not agree with.
I like that. I ran something new that we built recently called an event culture analyzer, which tries to put the finger on the cultural artifacts of a conference and denotes it with very specific indexes and elements, right? And I'll happily share that with you just to. But one of the things that it came up with regarding your role, right? And I just want to read this to you and get a first reaction
Okay.
to see if it, if this observation is right or wrong.
Okay.
Um, it says the power dynamic synthesis, right? TED concentrates symbolic power in the stage, relational power in the room, distributive power in the media, and economic power in membership and partnerships. Monique's strategic role sits precisely where those four powers must remain aligned.
Sure.
I'll drop it in the chat for you so you can
Yes.
read back what others think. What is Monique doing?
I would never use these words to describe
No, but
what I do.
one of the things you just said really, really resonated with me when you said there's a lot of um, the mothering energy of making sure everybody feels like they belong, and
Yes.
there's an intrinsic trust in mothers, right? I trust
Yep.
my mother because she always has the best intentions for me or my brother, or
That's right.
that's how mothers um, are generally trusted in its biggest sense. But then there are some elements like the topics at TED. Would I trust my mom, so to say, to explain to me what AI is and how how that would impact her role as an artist, or would I trust? So on very specific subjects, um, or would you trust your mom to do your accounting and submit your taxes, or you know, everybody has very specific skill sets, but
Hmm.
the intrinsic value of being looked after,
Hmm.
as if it, and trusting that the person that looks after you whilst you are at this event and with the best intentions of being at this event, I think that's a very interesting kind of trust that you just put forward, because it has very little to do with power, or it has very little to do with distributive power, economic power, or relational power, or it's something much more how would I say that, intrinsic, or like you said, emotional, right?
Yeah.
And I like how you mentioned that it was mostly the internal struggles you had to overcome in your own team's um, curative powers, right? Of you determine at the end of the day who comes on the stage or not, right? You
That's
you you
right.
you you have you have a major hand in what happens on that symbolic power stage and in the relational power in the room of who actually is in the room, of what you distribute to media and what you don't distribute to media. Although I
Hmm.
think the pledge of any TEDx or TED is that what goes on the stage, linearly kind of, is technically being put out into the open, I suppose, right?
Right.
Um, so I like that. I like that that idea of the four powers must remain aligned, but at the same time, how you say, I would never say that. But if you observe it
It's
from the
not about
outside, it's like,
power. Yeah, it's not about power. We look at ourselves as stewards.
yeah,
We look at ourselves as we want to help you be in a safe space to expand your curiosity and
yeah,
what that looks like for that, and being very thoughtful about what are the tools and the tactics and the content and the experiences and the
mm,
dinners and the parties and the people that will help you have that type of environment. That's why people come back for 20 plus. God forbid, like I think I told you that, I don't remember if I said this, like we give out pins. We started to give out pins saying I've been tier 20 TEDs and 15 TEDs. God forbid somebody gets the wrong pin. Oh my God. They care so much. They were like, why you don't have a 16-year pin? We do like 10-year plus and then we go to 20. Why don't you have it? The things we hear about these pins, that's how much they care. Okay. A
so the
dollar
recognition is a
pin.
very important thing about, yeah, yeah,
Right? And it's just like they care so much. And so we care so much. And it's this exchange of that, you know, that emotional experience of we're putting a lot of effort, care, thought, humanness into your experience, and you're bringing that back to us too. And so when it's like when it was describing power, I wouldn't use those words because I don't feel that.
I like that. Because it's intrinsic and not extrinsic, right? These things are,
Hmm.
yeah, but this is how potentially it's observed from the outside, right? So that's also something you can't necessarily always influence.
That's
The
right.
brand is in the eye of the beholder, and you do everything you can to manifest the values you've built over all of these years, and at the same time, yeah, the changes and observations that people have within it, or the polarization of the thinking, still happens, right?
Right.
You can't be unseen in those elements. Um, Let me ask you a question about what's currently on your horizon of change. You've gotten accustomed to this question over the past three editions, but what what's currently, like, if you're looking out at the horizon, I'm looking out at the hill here in Switzerland. What's currently on your horizon of change?
From the last time we spoken, I definitely use AI daily in my work.
Yeah,
So that is a definitely a big change over the year of how I started to lean into AI to be more efficient.
yeah,
And there's so much more to learn about how to use it to even make me even more efficient.
yeah.
But there's also me being in these rooms and hearing the builders of this and what's coming down the pike. It is a roller coaster of emotions. It is a
Oh yeah.
roller coaster of emotions. And grappling with all of the fantastic changes it's going to do for society, like knowing how hard some of these people are using to make healthcare so much better and to make certain things that we come across daily so much more useful and helpful to us. Like there are people who are really trying to dig into to make this some type of utopian society. And then
There's the
you
opposite truth.
and they're both living together. Like and as a human being, how do you process this? How do you process all of the good and all of the potential that can make society nowhere near good if certain things kind of happen and guardrails aren't put in place? And so there's this joy and worry living side by side that I think for the year ago, that wasn't even, you don't know what you don't know. You can't even talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think understanding my values around AI is something I'm struggling with.
Mm.
Um, and I think another thing is I'm really looking forward to all of the progression that we're doing with the move. We have our climate change conference coming back up. We usually do that every other year. We did
Nairobi,
it.
right? Is that the
Yeah,
one?
we had it. We're moving it to somewhere else. So we
Okay.
move it around. That one
Yeah.
always moves around. And so really excited about kind of what destination we're going to choose for that and what that's going to look like. You know, we took a pause for TED Next in 2026 because of all of the changes that were happening. And we got really bad dates that was
Yeah.
offered to us. And I was like, no, we're
Not
not
gonna
doing
work.
it.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. And
So
there's
we
a
got,
choice there too, right? Of
it's a
saying, okay,
choice.
let's time out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If this is
Redesign,
not,
rethink.
if this is not going to fit what we need it to fit and it doesn't make sense, we're not going to do it. And so we got our dates out, and we're definitely 2027 is definitely on the books, but
Yeah.
giving us the pause to really focus on the San Diego move, but also to, okay, so now this gives us a little bit extra time to think about what's the evolution of TED Next 2. What can we add that's a little bit different and whatever, because we are always trying to challenge ourselves in that
Hmm.
way. And, we have Sal Khan, who's now our Vision Steward, who's on our board, and he's bringing a lot of new energy around the education space, the Khan TED Institute, which is going to be a college level certificate program
Very
that's
cool.
going to be, $10,000 max for someone to kind of walk away with understanding AI and how to integrate that into business principles and things like that. So there's just like a lot of interesting stuff that's working and
Yeah.
that's in play. And I get to be a part of a lot of that stuff. So that's really exciting. So that's where I'm at.
Wow. I love that. Understanding my values around AI, and then you have this whole plethora of activations that you're working on, seeing in action, so you can test it in real time.
Right.
And I like the it's a parallel that we're also very active in finding, the what do you call it? The guardrails almost of application
Hmm.
in event design as well. Like, okay,
Yeah.
how do you, I think if you have a strong process, if you have strong language models, if you have a strong community of educated professionals or people that know about the process and use it in real time, we've seen a lot of, really interesting and good work where the quality, instead of, where the first mile gets reduced to a couple of centimeters in terms of the time it takes to crunch data and
Hmm.
evidence to more solidly be able to look at a situation, to assess it quicker, but then still use the human creativity in the prototyping and understanding interhuman dynamics on how stakeholders interact at events and that instinctive, there is no school for motherhood or for being a mother or a father,
Right.
but that instinctive learning you get from that, I think it's something that, let's say, applying that to the learning you have around AI is one of the, it's probably the discovery and the wonder that you're describing, which I really empathize with, and I always feel it is a place of hope. It is something that creates a lot of learning. I'm optimistic as well about how we can use it for event design, and
Hmm.
happily I'll share this little cultural analysis as a first snippet to give you an idea of what it does. But that is only just an input into the actual design process of creating future prototypes to help you think, but with a very solid background of data and of history and of longitudinal study, which a human brain can't wrap their heads around as quickly as a system like this could, right? So I think that's super exciting to see, and I hope that the pedigree that TED has been able to establish for the last 41 2 years. What is it now?
Yeah.
Um,
1984. Do the math.
yeah, 42 years. Yeah. Um, so that's yeah, that and I think that's super exciting. Thank you so much for sharing your horizon of change. I'm going to uh, reach out a little anchor a year from today to see how we're doing on the values in AI and understanding
Yeah.
them better. And
Yes. I love
thank,
our yearly conversations.
yeah, absolutely. And again, I hope we have the opportunity to meet in person, because that still hasn't happened.
3 years going.
But it's bound to happen at some stage, right? So I'm looking forward to that too, Monique. Thank you so much for taking the time and being part of this conversation today.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Terrific.
You've been hanging out backstage on Design to Change Designer Conversations. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and share conversations online using hashtag Design to Change and hashtag Event Canvas. Want more thought-provoking content like this? Visit designtochange.online to purchase your copy of Design to Change, elevating your abilities to look and act beyond the now. Don't forget, it's more than just a book. Experience a hard copy, audio format, video format, and even augmented reality. Experience it in your style and format. Tune into our next episodes and hear from more designers and change makers. Until then, we look forward to our next conversation.